welcome to Cast Off with Confidence. This episode is brought to you by Pentenius Yacht Insurance. And this episode and the one after is super special. I get to talk to Lisa Blair. I'm talking to her while she's hurtling around Antarctica, and she's very close to Cape Horn. She's approaching a storm with a forecast of 7 to 8 metre waves and possibly up to 50 knot winds. I am super excited and privileged on many levels. I've sailed with Lisa before and now I get to talk to her. This video is in 2 episodes because it's about an hour all up. And first, there's just a short snippet of the ocean to paint a little bit of the picture of what it's like out there. Remember, on videos and photos, something about the lens foreshortens the height of these waves so they don't look as big as they actually are. And the first video I'll show you is next to land. But don't forget, Lisa's coming up to Cape Horn, where the depth significantly decreases. So therefore, those waves will grow exponentially. So take a look, and I hope you enjoy it. So I'm safely on the land on the east coast of Australia, and yesterday I spoke with my friend Lisa Blair, who's hurtling around Antarctica heading for Cape Horn, and waves bigger than this, and they are building because obviously it's shallow, but Lisa's going around Cape Horn and going from 2 nautical miles of depth to 30 metres. And this will give you an idea of what water does as big waves hits shallower depth. So while Lisa won't be this close to rocks, she's certainly experiencing waves such as this, and actually bigger. So if you're not supporting her, this is why you should be. Have a listen to our podcast soon. Go, Lisa. Oh my goodness, look at the angle you're at.
Cool. I know, I thought I'd prop the computer up so it's flat, because yesterday I did a Zoom call and I left the computer on the desk and I was like laid over on the side and everyone's like, it's super weird. So I was like, oh, I'll try and make myself straight at least. So I don't know, I could try the other way if you want.
No, it's fabulous. It's real. You're looking amazing. I've just been addicted to the tracker and your blogs. You're doing a fantastic job. Just superb. And I know you've been tired, but you're looking amazing. What are your conditions right now?
So we've got a storm hitting tonight, which is going to have the eye of the storm, or just the northern part of the eye of the storm, hitting the boat, around 9-10 o'clock tonight. So that's going to bring through winds up to like 50 knots. So just on the leading edge of that, as you would know, storms are clockwise. I'm in the northeast sort of winds at the moment, and they're just slowly starting to back to the northwest at the moment. So I'm trying to get north, which makes it a bit tricky because it means I'm close haul sailing. And basically I'm just bashing my way upwind as close to the wind as I can comfortably sail. I'm not dead close hauled, I'm sort of close reaching, and just trying to get enough speed to try and get out of that kind of hot zone before it hits, or at least get to the northern part of it so it's not as brutal as what it would be if I was in the southern section of it. So yeah, so that's what I've been trying to do.
Yeah, fantastic. And that'll give you a bit more better angle. Is that right? As you've made that north heading, that'll give you a better angle as it hits as well.
Yeah, put me in a better position for the storm. And we've got one storm tonight, another storm tomorrow night, and then another one shortly after, just before around Cape Horn. So we're trying to get north as well for the second storm system coming through, to just try and get on the northern part of that. But if I can't get far enough north, I'll end up having to hove to tonight. So the conditions just now, the swell's only around 4 meters, but it's due to build up to 8 meters by tonight. So it is going to get quite brutal. And yeah, it's just bleak and cold and wet, and it's been raining on and off all night. And yeah, loving it.
Loving it. You're still
this is my least favorite point of sale.
Oh my goodness. Oh.
What are you going to do? Self-inflicted.
Self-inflicted. Oh, I've got so many places to go with that. I did have one question from one of your supporters that I'm interacting with and saying, what has driven you to do this? Why do you take on these challenges? Can you summarise that for us?
I don't think there's any one real reason. There's a multiple amount of reasons, but one of the biggest defining factors for me, you know, if someone had said to me 10 years ago that I'm going to go out and do all of these crazy things, I would have just laughed in their face and just said, no way, it's not possible. You know, I was basic English and math. I'm not very intelligent. I can't spell to save my life. Like, I didn't have all the skill sets that we were told growing up that allowed you to be successful or go out and do things. So when I did the Clipper race and I was able to raise the sponsorship and then race around the world, it was kind of like an epiphany moment for me where I realized that we're capable of far more than we think. And sailing's just like the passion element of me expressing what my capabilities are. But every project I do, I come away with that being so much more capable of achieving any goal I set by going through those journeys. So it sort of drives me to then go, okay, well, I'm now here. What else can I do that's going to get me to the next step of feeling like I can achieve anything that I want in this world? And I think that's a really big motivator for me. And I think it's a massive motivator because it's mostly set on self-perception. And my self-perception shifted when I was successful the first time, after going through a lot of effort and a lot of tears and everything to get there. And so that then, I guess, this is my way of sharing that sort of experience with other people, because hopefully these sort of journeys can inspire other people to show them that, you know, we are capable. You can do anything you want. You could just as easily be me on this boat sailing around Antarctica if you so chose to and if you wanted to. You know, there's nothing uniquely remarkable about me except determination. So and everyone has that if they choose to take it. So
absolutely,
yeah, I think that's a big motivator. And then obviously like the climate.
Yes, yeah. So we'll touch on that in a moment. You're nailing it as far as inspiring people. You're incredible, and the things you need is that motivation, that strength to carry on, that tenaciousness. And I know you have that in bucket loads, and boy, do you need it. With that, you say the additional, the climate and working with Bureau of Meteorology. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
For this project, I was very aware that I'm sailing in the Southern Ocean. I actually tried to get a lot of this science happening on the first record, and I just didn't have enough support and backing at the time. But it's such a data sparse region of our planet. There's very little data that's taken down here, and there's no data that really exists for the whole loop of the Southern Ocean, because ships will go to Antarctica and come back, or they'll dive down a little bit and deploy some drifter buoys, for example, and then come back. But there's none that are really doing that full circle view of what's impacting the Southern Ocean. So I basically wanted to make the boat as available as humanly possible to the scientific community to gather and support scientific research on board the boat while I'm doing this circumnavigation. So on board, we have a subsea research unit, which is taking sort of ocean health data readings. So it's acidity, salinity, PCO2, which is how much carbon is trapped in the Southern Ocean. It's sea temperature and just like chlorophyll and that general ocean health reading. So it'll give us a bit of an indicator on how the Southern Ocean is processing carbon, which is one of the biggest areas of our ocean to process and filter carbon. And it's also then going to give us an indication on just the general health in this area, because it's such a sensitive kind of biodiversity part of our oceans. And then I've got the microplastic sampler that I'm running. So I run a sample twice a day. So I run one for 22 hours, which is a 500 micron sample, and it's like a larger mesh sort of size sample. And then I run a 100 micron sample, which is a real fine mesh, for 2 hours a day, to try and catch microfibers and microplastics in the Southern Ocean. And we expect that we will find plastics. It's just a matter of getting an indication of how much. And it'll be great to cross-reference against the Volvo Ocean Race, because they took a microplastic sampler on their last race as well. So we've got some data there that we can cross-reference with, which will be really interesting. And then, you know, the list goes on. Then I'm deploying 8 Bureau of Meteorology weather drifter buoys. I've got 2 Argo research floats on board the boat that I'm also deploying. And I'm also logging all my depth readings for the Seabed 2030 depth research. And they're creating a map of the seafloor using citizen science. So any cruisers and yachties around the world can email the Seabed 2030 program, and they will actually send you a data logger to put into your network, and then you can log all your depths, and that'll go into basically an atlas of the sea floor that's getting created by 2030, and it's all going to be run by citizen science. So that's pretty cool. And then we modified a weather drifter buoy to become a floating weather station on board the boat. So my boat pings a data back to France, actually, to the Bureau of Meteorology in France, and then that gets fed into the global weather modelling. And when you get a weather forecast, I'm one of those data sets that have been influencing your weather forecasts. So that's also really cool.
That is really cool.
As much as I could do.
Yeah, that's certainly keeping you busy with everything else, and it's just fabulous that you can sort of multitask so much on this.
And one of the things for me too is a big part of it is education. So you know, if there's any teachers out there that want me to come and speak at their schools, I'm rolling out after the record for 6 months, trying to visit as many schools as possible as a no charge, whether it's a Zoom call or an in-person visit. I just want to be able to share my story with as many of these kids coming through. I think it's such an important story for that generation to hear, and then weave in the science and the science understanding and the plastic and the climate in and around that. And we're going to be using all the Canva templates to sort of leave the students and leave the teachers with worksheets and activities that they can do, you know, once I finish the talk. So yeah, if any teachers that are listening to this who want to have that happen for their school, just reach out through the website and drop us a line.
Fantastic. What a great thing to offer everyone. And I was talking to some people connected in that area yesterday about you, so we'll be talking down the line. But I want to talk about you as well. The work you're doing is amazing, but your blogs, if no one's if you haven't read them yet, for goodness sake, read them. You do an incredible job. And I was reading them till late last night, and one of them you said, I wondered why the boat was going slow, and I looked and we were doing 11 knots. I'm used to this roller coaster now. How do you get used to that?
Yeah, I know. It was pretty funny because normally I'm pretty happy if Climate Action Now is doing like 8 knots. Like, she does go really fast in the right conditions, don't get me wrong, and I have been going really fast lately. But I don't normally push her that much. So I'm normally quite conservative, and I guess, you know, where I've been able to let her fly a little bit more, I have for this trip. But I was quite surprised that it felt like I was doing 5 knots and we were doing like 11 knots still, and it felt slow. Yeah, I mean, I guess you just adapt, like you live and breathe this environment. Like I found last time when I got off the boat, walking straight lines was difficult because I was so used to walking on an angle and adapting for the roll of the swell that as I would walk, I would kind of do this as I'm walking, thinking I'm going in a straight line, but it was my body just trying to adapt for the swell that it was expecting that I was still on. So yeah, I mean, I get so desensitized. It's like me throwing out numbers like, oh yeah, it's a 6 meter wave or an 8 meter wave. It's like, you know, to me it's like, oh yeah, it's another day in the Southern Ocean. But to most people, those are really extreme conditions. So yeah, you just adapt.
Well done. I think to everyone, there are extreme conditions. You talk about 4 meter waves, 5, 6, and then 8 meter waves coming. So to put that in context, 4 meters is over a story. Now, go and stand by your wall in your house and think about that as a wall of water. That's sort of like the minimum waves you're getting. And that's huge. And you talk about climate action now being knocked down, it just shakes and come up. How do you shake and come back up?
I just brace, brace for the impact. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I think the biggest thing with being comfortable in the Southern Ocean on a trip like this is trusting your boat and trusting your skill set. And if you can trust your boat to get you through those conditions, which I definitely do, then they're not such a problem. You're not doubting every knockdown. You're not going, oh, is that the knockdown that's going to, you know, cause my mast to come down or cause a situation to occur. And so it's always been a very conscious decision of mine to make sure that the boat is impeccably prepared before I go. And I'm always doing 1,000,001 thousands of different jobs right up until the start line, always, because there's a never-ending list. But the key fundamental core safety and structure of the boat is always done to 110%. And I'm always heavily involved in that process myself. And that, to me, allows me to get that mental attitude where I can just shake off a knockdown where the boat's been masked in the water, and I know the mast can take it because David Lambourne did the rigging, and I know that the rigging wire is Arcus wire, so I know we can take the hits. And so, you know, it takes that level of doubt out of the equation and allows you just to kind of enjoy the fact that you're going through this wild roller coaster out here.
That is one of the benefits. I know how hard you work. I've seen just a small sample of it and how hands-on you are. And that is incredibly exhausting and a huge list. But like you say, one of the benefits is you know climate action now inside out. And you've had a lot of upgrades. Are you enjoying those upgrades and improvements?
Yeah, I'm actually really happy with how she's performing after this last refit. We've done a lot of the changes that I wanted to do for the first Antarctica record that I didn't have the funding for, that weren't critical to the structure of the boat, but were going to make life just generally a lot easier and a lot more fluid on board the boat. So we did a lot of those changes this time as well. And that's definitely just made life a lot easier. I've increased my fuel consumption, like my fuel carrying capacity, my water capacity. Everything's just more accessible and easier to get access to. Yeah, no, I'm really happy with it. And structurally, like, we've done so much. Like, we checked where the
I've lost you again, Lisa. I don't know if you can hear me. Sorry, you disappeared.
It'll get there.
You're back now. Okay, so you're very happy. Yeah, you're great. You've done your water tanks and fuel tanks, and you seem to be, that's very reassuring for you.
Yeah, and just like, we went over the boat with a fine-tooth comb, you know, so it was micro details the whole way along. And yeah, so I just know that we had the right team of people working on the boat over in Brisbane at Rivergate Marina there. And you know, that's just given me a lot of confidence, and it allows me to then go through these storm conditions and take these punishment conditions and feel confident that the boat can succeed through them. Yeah. And that my decisions out here are still safe because I know the structure and the integrity of the boat.
And how do you balance that safety with speed? Because obviously you're going for a record, and obviously you're in huge seas. You've got the boat, you've got the skill. How's that balancing act working?
Yeah, it's a constant rolling check-in, I guess you could say. I've got to always be, I guess, asking myself, do I need to prioritize sleep over performance? Do I need to prioritize performance over weather? Do I need to prioritize weather over performance? Like, what's the corresponding factors that are taking place? And Some days I've had major losses against Fedor Konyakov's trip. And then other days I've just well outstripped him on the speed. And I know I don't have to race the whole way around. I just have to do a little bit faster than him. And so that changes the way you kind of approach things, because you don't need to go 20 knots the whole time. You only need to go 8.5 knots to his 8, and you're going to get the record. So what I'm trying to do at the moment, and my goal for the Pacific Ocean, was to get a bit of a buffer in, so that if anything does happen, or if I have any delays further on in the more dangerous conditions that the South Atlantic will give me and the South Indian will give me, that I've got that little bit of a breathing space, so that I don't have to push, I don't have to stress, and I can just hove to in a storm if I need to, and not worry about the fact that Fedor was like right behind me or something. So at the moment, I'm 1,000 miles ahead of my last position from the 2017 record. And that's really the corresponding factor that I'm looking at, because when I finished the record last time, I was one day ahead of Fedor Konyakov when I dismasted, so I was beating him then, but I ended up finishing 12 hours behind him if we just deleted the dismasting section. And so I don't need to go a lot faster than my last track to actually break this record. And I know Fedor Konyakov has a few challenges and hurdles coming up in the South Atlantic Ocean that he battled, so he had a few major delays there that'll give me a really good lead. So as long as I can stay well ahead of my last track, I'm pretty comfortable that I'll be able to break that record. But yeah, it is definitely a balancing act. I think at the moment, throughout all of it, I've just tried to use that concept of when it's safe to do so, race and sail fast, but I'm still not even sailing the boat within 100% of her capacity. I'm operating at around 70 or 80% at the moment. And when I'm in storm conditions or it's rough, then that goes down to like 50% of the boat's performance capabilities. So yeah, where it's safe to do so, I race, and where it's not safe to do so, I throttle back and I go for safety over speed. And I still find I'm either matching Fedor's speed or I'm still just ahead of him anyway. So yeah, it's worked out pretty well.
Yeah, fantastic. That's very wise. So with that analysing and that balance as you go, do you talk to yourself out loud, or do you have lonely moments because you've got no one to bounce off with physically with you?
Yeah, I know, and it is a big part of solo sailing is coming, I guess, adjusting the way you make decisions, because you don't have someone to like just soundboard it off. I know when I first solo sailed, I got into a bit of trouble and I had to deploy a drogue, and it wasn't until I phoned a friend that I felt comfortable doing that, because I'd never done it before and it was my first solo trip. And so sometimes you do need that sounding board. I think now though, I've got, what do I have, about 40,000 nautical miles solo sailing experience. So I've kind of added up the miles and built a new routine with how I process or strategize things on board. The number one focus for me 100% always is safety is priority. I run a 5-second rule. So if anything happens, any emergency takes place at sea or on deck, something breaks and I hear, chaos taking place on deck, I employ a 5-second rule. So I just take 5 seconds to stop and think before I make a decision. And that allows me to remember things like putting my life jacket on, making sure I'm tethered. Do I need any tools to address that situation? And then go up and assess the situation before I actually run out and attack it and deal with it. I never ever just like bolt out and run up on deck, and that's the sort of thing that you do see a lot in crewed boats is a rope will snap and a sail will start flapping out of control and everyone just runs up with no life jackets on, no safety tethers. They're in their underwear still from being asleep in their bunk or whatever, and they haven't taken their own safety as a priority in that situation. The sail's not going to change. It's going to still flap. Like, it's not going to hurt the sail more to have it flap for a little bit longer for you to take safety as a priority. So I think for me, that's, a big plan of attack. And then with decisions like the big storms coming through and things like that, I have my shore manager, Jeff, from the National Maritime College, and I've got Bob McDavitt, the meteorologist at Met Bob, and so they're really good sounding boards. And obviously, I run a lot of things past my family as well. So yeah, I might be just the only one on the boat, but I actually have like a pretty big team of people behind me. So
yeah, fantastic. That's super important to a message there, because when you do panic and knee-jerk reaction, you tend to create another emergency. So that's a wise words to share.
Pounds it.
Yeah. So you're coming up to Cape Horn, and a relatively narrow 1,000 kilometres passage, and you've got 3 storms. What preparation are you doing? Anything different with approaching that area and coinciding with these storms?
I'm just sort of watching everything really closely at the moment, because I'm still sort of 8 days or 9 days away from Cape Horn. But it's the biggest concerning factor with this approach to Cape Horn is just the swell and coming onto the continental shelf. So we've got 3 big storm fronts coming through, one tonight, one tomorrow night, and then another one that's going to sort of be hanging around the Horn for a couple of days, bringing 30 to 35 knot westerly to southwest winds. So that's going to generate swell. That's going to build up quite a lot of sea state, big waves. And the problem with the approaches to Cape Horn is the depth of the ocean changes from 5 kilometres to 30 meters as you come onto that continental shelf. And yeah, and it's massive. And if you're thinking that I've got a 6 or 8 meter wave in 5 kilometer deep water, that 6 or 8 meter wave is going to double in size at least as it hits shallow water. So that's really the only thing that I'm focused on at the moment is the waves. The wind's not too much of an issue at this point because of the direction of the wind. If it was a northerly wind coming through, then I would be more concerned about the wind, because you can get the katabatic winds off the mountains off the coast of Chile. So they're so big that gravity effectively accelerates the wind as it falls down the mountain, and you can end up getting like 200-kilometer-hour winds just like bam out of nowhere, just strike the boat. So because the winds are westerly to southwest, I won't be getting necessarily those katabatic winds, but I will be getting really big seas, messy seas. So that's just going to have to be something that I nurse the boat through, and I'll be reducing my sail area, potentially require putting the deployment of a drogue out. So we'll just have to sort of play that by ear. But other than that, the winds follow me around Cape Horn quite nicely at this point, so I'm quite happy with that. I'm expecting this storm may move off a little bit earlier as well, or push a little bit further to the south, which would then ease the conditions on the approaches to Cape Horn. But the situation's quite fluid at the moment with the weather patterns. They're changing quite frequently as these 2 storm cells coming through tonight and tomorrow night, and then the next one, they all sort of influence each other and kind of change and sort of shift on a daily basis. So hopefully the conditions ease off just enough to make a safe rounding.
Yeah, a lot to consider. And if anyone's listening and you haven't looked at Lisa's tracker, it's fantastic. It's got the wind, the direction, the strength, and her track, and her competitor's track, and her previous track, and it's addictive. Lisa Blair says, well, take a look. What about icebergs? Are they coming into play at the moment?
Yeah, so Jeff's and his partner Sue, they've been brilliant in talking with a company called Seacor. So Seacor supported the project last time. They've jumped on board again this time for Iceberg Forecasting. So we'll be getting the first forecast just on the approaches to Cape Horn, which will show me the iceberg movement around Cape Horn to sort of South Georgia Island. And then we'll get another forecast after South Georgia Island for that next section of the Atlantic. So at the moment, they're not a risk. We've just been told that there's no icebergs in my region where I am at present, but potentially on the approaches to Cape Horn for sure. The Antarctic Peninsula sort of falls on the eastern side of Cape Horn, so the majority of the icebergs end up drifting with the currents towards the east. So more of the iceberg risk is going to be in that first 2 weeks after my rounding of Cape Horn, than the pre-rounding of Cape Horn. So the strategy there is basically get north as quick as possible, So go straight up to the Falkland Islands and then go north up right up to my sort of 45-degree south line, and then stay there until I clear the iceberg debris area, giving myself a really good safe clearance. So with these forecasts, I can see any iceberg that's 150 meters in size or larger. And the general rule of thumb is that for every iceberg that's known or that we can see, there's up to 50 unknown icebergs within a 200 nautical mile range of that one known iceberg. So what I tend to do is just set exclusion zones. So I route myself well outside 200 miles from every known iceberg with the intention that I don't see an iceberg at all, because I'm in a fiberglass boat. It would be a bad scenario. And last record, I actually ended up sailing within 150 miles of a known iceberg because I had to void the world record to get further north, because they had traveled so far north that year. So, hopefully I don't see them. Hopefully they stay well south this year. But given that there's that big piece of ice broke off the shelf, and has headed towards South Georgia Island, I'm expecting that there's a larger debris area of icebergs this year than there was 5 years ago when I sailed around, and especially the effects of climate change taking place as well. So fingers crossed. But yeah, unfortunately, when you get iceberg regions as well, you tend to get heavy fog. So it's really cold sea temperatures with the warmer air temperature. So you get the sea fog or advection fog, and that fog means that I can't see the iceberg. So you kind of end up flying blind using your radar and your sea temperature to sort of monitor for icebergs. But yeah, that iceberg forecast from Sea Corps is fundamental to the safety of getting through those areas.
That's quite something, having to add that into the mix of everything else. And I'm very happy to hear about exclusion zones. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. That's part one. Part two will be coming tomorrow. Well, Lisa will talk more about how she deals with the cold, and also about the difference between the South Pacific and moving into other oceans as per the Atlantic, and the differences there. She talks about how so far it's an easy ride and she expects it to get a lot harder. So tune in and join us for the second episode. And in the meantime, head on over to lisablairsailstheworld.com, get on the tracker, follow her, support her however you can, even if it's just likes or shares, or right up to collaborating with others and buying a degree. As a sponsor of a degree, I'm super excited to see when she crosses our longitude line. Also have a look at sistershiptraining.com. We've got lots more podcasts and videos and video podcasts. So take a look and say good day. In the meantime, I wish you safe sailing.